Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The basement door that should never be opened. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Unearthly Discovery. Emma peered through the dusty window of the old Victorian house, the last remnants of sunset casting a warm glow on the peeling paint. She had inherited this house from a distant relative she'd never met, and now, as the new owner, she was beginning to understand why the property had been left to her. The small Midwestern town seemed to hold its breath as she settled in. The air was thick with the smell of must and old wood, and the creaking floorboards echoed with every step she took, as if the house was trying to whisper secrets to her. As she moved through the dimly lit rooms, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows played tricks on her eyes, and the stillness of the house felt unnervingly oppressive. She reached the cellar door, an old wooden panel, half hidden behind a stack of forgotten furniture. It had always been closed, but today, Emma felt an inexplicable urge to open it. Curiosity and a vague sense of foreboding pulled her down the stairs. The cellar was colder than the rest of the house, and the air smelled of damp earth and decay. Emma's flashlight flickered erratically as she scanned the room, revealing nothing more than old crates and cobwebs. Her eyes, however, were drawn to a section of the wall that seemed disturbed by something ancient and unsettling. There, embedded in the wall, was a small, rusted door. Strange symbols and warnings had been scrawled across it in what looked like old, faded paint. Emma's heart pounded as she found a small drawer beneath a workbench, and, after rummaging through layers of grime and dust, her fingers closed around a cold, iron key. The key was intricate, adorned with unfamiliar runes, and fit perfectly into the lock of the hidden door. Her curiosity was now a burning necessity, but as she ascended the stairs, she was met by Mr. Thompson, her elderly neighbor, who had been watching from his porch. His face, usually warm and welcoming, was now pale and strained. "I wouldn't go down there if I were you," he said, his voice trembling. "Some things are better left untouched." Emma's gut tightened. She had lost her mother recently, and the grief had left her vulnerable, her judgment clouded. She was searching for answers, something to anchor her in the strange new life, and this mysterious door seemed to promise those answers. As Mr. Thompson's warning echoed in her mind, Emma felt an uneasy shiver creep up her spine. The house was holding on to secrets, and she was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. Chapter 2. The Unseen Force. The next few days in the house were marked by an increasing sense of dread. Emma could no longer ignore the unsettling whispers that seemed to drift through the halls, the cold drafts that brushed against her skin even when the windows were shut tight. At night, the lights would flicker sporadically, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Each creak and groan of the house felt like a warning, urging her to abandon her curiosity about the hidden door. Determined to understand what she had uncovered, Emma threw herself into researching the house's history. The local library, a quaint brick building with a creaky floor, held the key to her investigation. Old newspapers and town records revealed a troubling pattern. Several previous occupants had vanished without a trace. Their disappearances were shrouded in mystery, with authorities baffled and rumors spreading among the townsfolk. Emma's research also led her to an old, leather-bound book in the library's archives. It detailed a local legend about a cursed entity bound to a hidden door. According to the legend, the entity thrived on fear and despair, feeding off the lives of those who dared to unlock the door. The stories were chillingly specific accounts of strange phenomena and eerie occurrences that matched Emma's own experiences. Back at the house, Emma's obsession with the door grew. She spent hours in the cellar, studying the symbols and trying to decipher their meaning. Her once rational skepticism was now overshadowed by mounting fear. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Her friends, Sarah and David, who had come to visit, noticed the change in her demeanor. "Emma, you're scaring us," Sarah said, her voice tinged with concern as she watched Emma's frantic attempts to unravel the mystery. "You need to take a break. This obsession isn't healthy." David, usually the voice of reason, was equally worried. "We're here to help you, but you need to stop fixating on that door. It's taking over your life." Emma, defensive and on edge, brushed off their concerns. "You don't understand. Something is wrong, and I need to figure out what it is. I can't just ignore it." Her friends exchanged worried glances as they left, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts and the oppressive atmosphere of the house. As the darkness closed in around her, she felt an inexplicable pull toward the basement, where the hidden door awaited. Despite her fear, the lure of the unknown grew stronger, drawing her ever closer to the dark secrets waiting behind that cursed door. Chapter 3. The Door Opens. Emma stood at the top of the cellar stairs, the old iron key heavy in her trembling hand. The whispers that had haunted her nights seemed to coil around her now. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. The air was thick with an oppressive chill, and she could almost feel the anticipation of the house itself, as if it were holding its breath in the dark. With a deep breath, Emma inserted the key into the rusted lock. The metal groaned in protest as she turned it, the sound echoing ominously through the empty house. The door creaked open, revealing a shadowy abyss beyond. Emma's flashlight flickered as she descended the stairs, each step a descent into the unknown. The basement was a vast, unsettling space, illuminated only by the dim beam of her flashlight. Strange artifacts lined the shelves, ancient relics, tattered books, and bizarre trinkets that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Disturbing symbols, etched in what looked like dark, dried blood, covered the walls. The atmosphere was suffocating, and the air seemed to thicken with a sense of foreboding. Emma's fascination quickly turned to terror as she felt an icy draft sweep through the room, carrying with it a whisper that seemed to call her name. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows in the corners of the room twisted and writhed as if alive. Her flashlight flickered wildly, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. Panic surged through her as she realized she was not alone. Strange events began to unfold with increasing frequency. Objects on the shelves started to move of their own accord, knocking against one another with eerie precision. Emma's eyes darted around, struggling to make sense of the chaos. She stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps as a cold hand seemed to brush against her skin. The disturbances did not go unnoticed. Her friends and neighbors began to see the changes in Emma. Sarah and David, who had been concerned before, were now alarmed by her erratic behavior and the growing sense of dread surrounding her. Emma's once vibrant eyes were now clouded with fear, and her voice trembled as she described the horrors she had witnessed. The tension in the house was palpable, a tangible thing that seemed to press down on everyone who entered. Emma's obsession with the basement grew, consuming her every waking moment. As the strange occurrences escalated, the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the true nature of the malevolent presence began to reveal itself. Emma's quest for answers had unleashed something far darker than she had ever imagined, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Chapter 4. The Curse Revealed. Emma's sleepless nights were consumed by frantic research. The basement had become a place of both obsession and dread, and the more she uncovered, the more her world seemed to unravel. Armed with old documents and local lore, she pored over every detail she could find. The local library's basement, with its musty smell and dim lighting, became her second home as she dug through historical records and faded newspapers. The breakthrough came when she found a tattered journal hidden among a stack of ancient town records. The journal belonged to Jonathan Harker, a local historian who had vanished mysteriously decades ago. Its pages were filled with disturbing entries about an ancient ritual performed by a secretive group in the town's early days. The ritual, intended to harness dark powers, had gone disastrously wrong, leaving behind a curse bound to the basement door. The ritual had not only unleashed a malevolent entity, but also left it craving the fear and despair of anyone who dared to disturb it. As Emma delved deeper, she discovered that the curse had claimed the lives of those who had previously occupied the house. The entity's influence had grown stronger with each passing decade, feeding off the fear and misery of its victims. The dark symbols on the basement walls were part of an intricate binding spell, now twisted and corrupted beyond recognition. Outside the house, the curse's effects were becoming increasingly apparent. Strange phenomena began to plague the town animals, behaving erratically, sudden and unexplained blackouts, and a pervasive sense of dread that seemed to hang in the air. Residents whispered about the house on the hill, their fear palpable as they exchanged uneasy glances. Emma's friends, Sarah and David, confronted her with growing alarm. They had seen the toll the house was taking on her, both physically and mentally. Sarah's voice was strained with worry as she pleaded with Emma. "You need to get out of there, Emma. This isn't just about you anymore. It's affecting everyone." David, his face pale and worn, added, "We can find someone to help. You don't have to face this alone. Please, just leave the house." Emma's resolve hardened. Her sense of responsibility was overwhelming. "I can't just walk away," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I need to fix this. I need to stop it before it hurts anyone else." Her friends' pleas fell on deaf ears as Emma returned to the house, her mind racing with the knowledge of what she had unleashed. The entity was growing bolder, and Emma knew she was running out of time. The curse's grip tightened around the town, and with each passing day, the darkness grew closer to consuming everything she held dear. The final confrontation loomed, and Emma was resolved to face it, no matter the cost. Chapter 5. Descent into Madness. The house seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its oppressive presence growing stronger with each passing day. Emma's every waking moment was consumed by the malevolent force she had unleashed. The disturbances that plagued her had become increasingly violent doors, slamming shut on their own, guttural whispers that reverberated through the walls, and shadows that seemed to move with a will of their own. Emma's attempts to maintain control only seemed to exacerbate the chaos. Her days blurred nights, each one more horrifying than the last. Hallucinations plagued her relentlessly twisted faces appearing in the mirror, sinister figures lurking in the corners of her vision. The entity seemed to revel in her suffering. Emma's once bright eyes were now hollow, and her sleep-deprived state only fueled her descent into madness. Her isolation became complete. Friends and family reached out, but Emma's grip on reality slipped further with each encounter. Sarah and David, their faces etched with concern, tried to intervene, but Emma pushed them away, her paranoia and fear making her push away anyone who tried to help. Her house, once a refuge, had become a prison, its dark corners now teeming with malevolent energy. The turning point came when Emma, desperate and nearly broken, stumbled upon a ritual described in one of the old books she had found. The ritual offered a temporary reprieve from the entity's torment, promising a short-lived peace if performed correctly. Emma, with shaking hands, prepared for the ritual. Candles were arranged in a circle. Ancient symbols were drawn on the floor, and a strange mixture of herbs and salts was prepared. The process was intricate and exhausting, but Emma's desperation drove her to complete it. As she performed the ritual, the entity's wrath reached its peak. The house seemed to convulse with anger, and Emma felt the full force of the entity's rage. But as the final incantation was spoken, a brief calm settled over the house. The oppressive energy lessened, and the whispers faded. Emma experienced a fleeting sense of relief, a brief respite from the nightmare. However, the relief was short-lived. The ritual had only been a temporary fix, and Emma knew it. The curse remained, its grip on the house and the town as strong as ever. Emma's mental and physical state deteriorated further, the brief moment of calm doing little to alleviate the relentless horror that awaited her. As Emma prepared for the next steps, she felt the crushing weight of her responsibility. The entity was far from defeated, and the curse continued to wreak havoc. Her battle was far from over, and with each passing moment, the darkness grew stronger, threatening to consume everything in its path. Chapter 6. The Town's Desperation. The ripple effects of the curse soon extended beyond Emma's house, enveloping the entire town in its malevolent grasp. The once peaceful streets of the small Midwestern town were now filled with whispers of dread and panic. Residents reported horrifying nightmares that left them sleepless and on edge. Children awoke, screaming, their faces pale with fear, while adults stumbled through their days in a daze of anxiety and paranoia. Strange, unexplained attacks plagued the town animals, found mutilated, crops mysteriously withered, and an eerie fog seemed to cling to the streets, suffocating any sense of normalcy. Emma's friends, Sarah and David, remained her primary source of support, but their patience was wearing thin. As the town's desperation grew, so did their own frustration. Sarah, once unwavering in her support, now struggled with doubt. Emma, this is more than we can handle. People are suffering, and it's clear that whatever's happening is beyond us, she said one night, her voice a mix of desperation and weariness. David, too, was torn between his loyalty to Emma and the mounting pressure from the town. He found himself caught between trying to calm the increasingly hostile townsfolk and aiding Emma in her efforts. "We need help," he urged Emma. "Town's falling apart, and we can't do this alone. We need experts, maybe even authorities, someone who can really understand what's happening." But Emma's trust in outsiders was faltering. As tension mounted, a sense of betrayal emerged. Unbeknownst to Emma, one of her closest allies, a local historian who had been quietly researching alongside her, was secretly feeding information to the town's more skeptical leaders. This betrayal only added to the chaos, further complicating their efforts to combat the curse. Emma's attempts to communicate with the entity grew increasingly desperate. She conducted a scenes, using the symbols and artifacts she had found in the basement to attempt a direct confrontation. The results were both illuminating and horrifying. During the scenes, the entity's true nature was revealed. It was a malevolent force that thrived on the fear and despair it generated. It grew stronger with every horrifying event it orchestrated, feeding off the anguish of the town's people to gain more power. As Emma learned more about the entity's nature, she realized the full extent of the curse's power. The entity's hunger for fear was insatiable, and it was using the town's suffering to become increasingly formidable. The town's atmosphere was suffused with terror, and Emma felt the weight of her responsibility more than ever. The stakes had never been higher, and the town's desperation mirrored her own as she faced the grim reality of the curse's effects. The struggle to contain the darkness was now not just a battle for her own sanity, but a fight for the town's very survival. Chapter 7. The Final Confrontation. The town lay in a state of despair, its residents huddling in fear as the curse continued its relentless grip. Emma knew time was running out. The entity's malevolent influence had only grown stronger, and the town's suffering had reached a breaking point. Her only hope was a final, desperate ritual. She had uncovered a last-ditch effort to banish the entity and end the curse once and for all. Emma's ally in this final effort was a reclusive, occult expert named Evelyn, who had agreed to help despite her own fears. The two women prepared the ritual with painstaking care. They gathered the necessary components: ancient texts, rare herbs, and sacred symbols, each item chosen for its power to counteract the entity's dark energy. The ritual demanded immense bravery and sacrifice, requiring them to confront not just the entity, but their deepest fears. In the dim, oppressive light of the basement, Emma and Evelyn set up the ritual's intricate pattern. The air was thick with tension and an almost tangible sense of foreboding. Emma's hands shook as she traced the final symbols on the floor, her mind racing with the gravity of what was about to happen. The basement seemed to grow colder, the darkness pressing in from all sides as the ritual began. The entity responded with violent agitation. Objects flew through the air, the walls trembled, and the whispers became a cacophony of rage. Emma and Evelyn chanted the incantations, their voices barely audible over the din of the entity's fury. The ritual was a battle of wills, with every word they spoke a defiance against the entity's power. As the climax of the ritual approached, the confrontation reached its peak. Emma faced the entity directly, feeling its rage like a physical force. It took on a form that was both nightmarish and surreal, a writhing mass of darkness and distorted faces. The entity's presence was overwhelming, feeding off the fear it had generated and growing ever more powerful. Emma was forced to confront her deepest fears, memories of her mother's death, the loneliness that had driven her to this cursed house. Each fear was a battle she had to win to complete the ritual. With Evelyn's help, Emma fought through the terror and completed the final incantation. In a blinding flash of light, the basement was engulfed in an explosion of energy. The entity's screeching roar was cut off as it was forcibly torn from the realm, banished into the void. The basement collapsed in a storm of dust and debris, leaving behind a ruinous mess of what had once been a dark sanctuary. Emma, battered and bruised, emerged from the wreckage with Evelyn. The town was left to deal with the aftermath of the curse's influence. The immediate threat was gone, but the damage was done. Emma and the townsfolk faced a long road to recovery, their lives forever changed by the horrors they had endured. The curse had been lifted, but the scars it left behind would take time to heal. Emma, now marked by the ordeal, faced a new challenge, rebuilding her life and helping the town heal from the trauma that had almost destroyed them all. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The dust of the destroyed basement had settled, leaving a scene of devastation that mirrored the upheaval of the past weeks. The town, though relieved that the immediate threat had been vanquished, faced a long and painful recovery. Streets were cleared of debris, homes were repaired, and the pervasive fog of fear began to lift, but the scars of the curse were evident in every corner of the community. Emma walked through the town's main street, taking in the quiet resilience of the people around her. The once lively town was now subdued, its residents casting wary glances at the house on the hill where the nightmare had begun. Emma's own home was a wreck, but the greater devastation was visible in the weary faces of her neighbors. Reflecting on her harrowing journey, Emma was acutely aware of the personal toll the ordeal had taken. The cost of her actions was evident in the strain on her relationships and the deep-seated changes within herself. Her bond with Sarah and David had mended, though the process had been fraught with tension and grief. They had been her anchors in the storm, and now, with the worst behind them, they were slowly rebuilding their friendships and supporting each other through the healing process. Emma made the decision to stay in the town. The community needed help, and she felt a deep responsibility to be part of its recovery. She worked alongside her neighbors, helping to restore what had been lost and offering support to those who struggled with the aftermath. Her presence was a symbol of hope and resilience, though she knew that her own healing would be a slower, more personal journey. Yet, as the town began to return to some semblance of normalcy, a subtle, lingering unease remained. Emma, while walking alone near the ruins of the basement, noticed something strange. A shadow seemed to flicker at the edge of her vision, a familiar sensation of being watched that sent a shiver down her spine. She dismissed it as residual fear, a remnant of the trauma she had endured. But deep down, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the entity's influence might not be entirely gone. The darkness had been banished, but the curse had left its mark, and Emma was left with a haunting suspicion that the horror might not be fully over. The finality of the battle felt incomplete, and the shadows in the corners of her mind seemed to whisper that the terror was merely lying in wait, ready to return when least expected. As the sun set over the town, Emma looked out at the fading light, her heart heavy with the knowledge that while the immediate danger had passed, the scars of the past would linger long into the future. The entity's presence might have receded, but its dark legacy was a reminder that true peace was a fragile thing, and the horrors of the past might never be entirely vanquished.